a couple of things I just want to clear up. I'm sure everybody, or most everybody, has seen the notice that was in the penny saver, inviting everyone to come to the meeting, which is, I'm glad whoever put it in, I'm glad they did. But there's a couple of things that are incorrect in what was put in the paper. It says here that the request is being made to make an amendment to the town solar law. That's not what the zoning board of appeals do. We do not make amendments, we do not make laws. We try to grant relief to residents on the law. That's all we're here to do. Second part about this, it says that this would be a direct contradiction to the Stafford zoning law. Almost every decision that this board makes is a contradiction to the zoning law. That's why we try to grant relief. And sitting here, I see a couple of members in the audience that have come in front of us asking for relief on their own issues. So it's something that we do every month. And last but not least, it says here that any change in the law would show a direct bias in favor of the company and a select few to benefit from this project. I've had the privilege to be on this board for 14 years. We have never made a decision that was biased one way or the other. And I take offense to that, whoever put this in. Second of all, it would be nice if somebody wanted to put this in the penny saver, that they sign their name to it so we know who it was. I mean, if you're going to do something, sign your name to it. Don't be afraid of it. But I do take offense to that. Couple of things. All questions tonight, statements will be directed to the board. This isn't going to be a shouting contest. We're not talking over each other. If somebody asks a question, allow it to be answered. Don't interrupt. We'll have plenty of time to answer all the questions. Speaking of which, everybody that raises their hand to ask a question has 3 minutes to ask their question. Anybody else on the board have anything to say before we start? Okay, we'll open the public hearing. We're going to do this, seeing that there's 2 separate projects. We're going to run both of the public hearings at the same time. We'll open and close them both together because it's the same request. They're identical. Any feedback? Any questions?
Does the board have a site plan map, Andy, we can look at?
Yep. We have all kinds of maps. I'm sure Dan Huntington from the solar company, I'm sure he will be here shortly. I'm sure he always brings all kinds of maps. Yeah, if you want. Before we get started, I'll just read the notice that was in the paper for the public hearing. Notice is hereby given that the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Stafford will hold their March 21st board meeting at the Stafford Town Hall, public hearing. The Zoning Board at that time will conduct a public hearing regarding the application for a zoning variance permit for BW Solar, Bob and Michelle Wood, to construct 2 solar arrays on the property on Batavia Stafford Town Line Road. Tax stamp number 1-02-117.1 and 1-02-115. Said zoning board of appeals will convene at the time stated above. You can go up and take a look at the map if you want to.
We need Mr. Huntington here to answer questions.
I don't know where Deanne is. I don't know. No. I'm look. I know the woods are here. Oh, I'm hiding back there. Have you talked to Dan at all today?
No.
Okay. I don't have the number for him.
Hi, Mike. Would it be appropriate at this time to review what happened with the county planning board? Feedback from, there was an article in Batavia, I don't know if everybody saw it.
We normally do that, not during the public hearing, but as we get into the,
All right.
when we're gonna vote. I'm sure everybody has read in the Batavia or in the Batavia Daily News or wherever what the county, and we'll go through that when it's ready to that. Hang on 2 seconds, I'll see. You didn't read it?
Nope.
Yeah. What would we do with our cell phones?
You don't have his number, do you, Todd? No.
Yeah.
Do you have it?
Yeah.
Shoot.
Haven't got it dealt yet.
Oh. Silly me, I thought
We
you
all have it now too.
had it on the top of your head. Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Somebody else.
That's true.
No, it's Dan Honey.
You can come forward with that.
I'd rather read it.
You didn't want to give it to everybody? I don't know what you want. Talk to them. Okay. Yep. He's in the parking lot. What's that?
Nice out,
I thought you were listening. Nick, you retired. Yeah.
we miss him. He's a good guy.
Just retired, didn't
Yeah, just before the first of the year. We miss our senior member. Yeah, he's doing good. I live across the street from him, so I see him on a regular basis. Oh, yeah. I'm sure you've got some Nick stories. We all do. And some of them can be told in public.
Just came from Binghamton.
No pressure.
Okay, Dan's here.
He's just looking to see if the easel's in the other room.
Maybe Bob would know.
It's not a big deal.
Hey, Bob, do you know what happened to the easel? I was here for the last meeting. Okay.
Where are we at?
Dan's here, we're ready for questions. And Dan, before you got here, I explained to everybody that questions and comments are gonna be directed to us. And then if we got a question that obviously we can't answer, that's something you can answer, then you can answer it. They're not to address you. Okay?
Let's start with.
We got one right. Go ahead.
I'd like to read a little bit of that article from the Daily. I know I only got 3 minutes, but from the Batavian, I can just make a comment on that. The law stipulates a 200-foot minimum for setbacks on non-residential property. The proposal asks for 100 feet to the east, west, south, and 0 feet on the west, bordering the adjacent solar project. The law stipulates a 1,000-foot minimum to residential property lines. The proposal seeks a 75-foot setback. Altamar has said that granting of such large variances by the Stafford ZBA may undermine the local law adopted by the town board and set a precedence for future applications. In addition, the application requests a variance from the real property value protection clause of the law, he said. Since this is not a use or dimensional requirement, it is questionable as to whether the ZBA can grant such a waiver. He's suggesting the applicants petition the town board to amend its solar law instead of seeking variances from the ZBA, especially given that Stafford's solar regulations differ significantly from other towns in Genesee County.
The only thing that I disagree with that, from what Felipe said, is when he said that it may create a precedent. I think all of us here have been to enough training sessions with New York State and New York State attorneys who tell us time and time again, there is no such thing as precedent. Every individual case is different. What they're requesting, the time, whatever. So I've heard that numerous times at our meetings where people will say, it will create a precedent. I have asked that question of our New York State attorneys numerous times with the same answer. There is no such thing as precedent. So that's the only thing I disagree with Felipe on.
So, that being said, Mike, says the real property value protection clause said this is not a use or dimensional requirement. This is questionable as to whether the ZBA can grant such a waiver. What's your response to that?
My response is 6:45 tonight, our town attorney said that we cannot grant a variance on that 2,500-foot real property value.
Thank you.
So that was at 6:45. Now something's changed since then, my phone's been off.
If I could add just one extra piece there.
Sure.
One thing that the article did get inaccurate was the 75-foot setback from a residential property. We can show on our plans that at no point does the outline of this project ever come within less than 200 feet of a residential property. So I'm not sure where the 75-foot variance from the 1,000-foot came from, but we can show on all of the site plans that we've submitted from the very beginning that the edge of the property, which is what's defined as the solar panels, never comes closer than 200 feet to any residence. And that's actually the closest it ever is along the Stafford Town Line Road.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the actual variance that you've requested. There's one variance, 1,000 feet, you're asking for 200 feet. There's a 200-foot setback in the law, and you're asking for 100. There's another setback of 200 feet, and that's from property to property, and you're asking for 0 between the two solar arrays. And it does say here, reduction of 1,000-foot setback from residential property lines to 75. So you did request that.
I guess that was an error. It at no point is it 75 feet.
And this
from any
came,
residential
so
property.
you know, this came out of
Okay,
your solar books that you gave us.
okay, we can make sure.
And that's exactly what I sent to Felipe, exactly. As a matter of fact, I made a copy of what you had put in the, whoever put in the book,
Okay,
and sent that to Felipe. So that's where he got that from.
sure, and I will make sure to check with our engineers.
Okay.
And fix that.
So, hold on, sorry.
If I can just rewind for a minute.
Sure.
So the attorney's opinion was that the ZBA could not grant a variance on the real property value.
At 2,500 foot, correct.
Did he or she give any indication who could? I mean, would that be a town board?
Yes, he said the town board can do that, but the zoning board cannot.
My question was, is the intent to vote tonight?
Yes.
Then how can you vote on a document that says 75 with reliance that it will change?
We can, if someone chooses, whomever is going to make the motion to this, we can exclude that from our motion. It does not have to be a part of it,
Which it would not be there at all.
correct? Because it's exactly what you're saying, it shouldn't have been there.
Correct, it shouldn't have said 75,
Yeah.
so if that's taken out of the roll for vote, obviously that would be something we look at later on and can make sure it's amended correctly.
Okay.
Is it possible, acceptable, if Mr. Huntington would tell us more about VW?
Oh, you can tell.
About the company?
Sure. We're about 2 years old right now. We have roughly 16 employees working throughout 15 or 16 states. We are backed by BW Group, which is an international shipping conglomerate. We are one of the renewable divisions that they started in North America. Obviously, the writing was on the wall that renewables is the place to be. Everyone that works for our company came from another renewable company and was brought together with very specific expertise. I specialize in New York State along with my other development counterpart. So the two of us work on all the projects in New York State. I also work on some projects down in Georgia as well. Those are my two states that I've spent all my time in. And BW is focused on long-term ownership and long-term growth. There are a lot of companies out there that do just paper development. We are not one of them. So our goal is long-term to become an IPP, an independent power provider. And that means that we build, own, and operate and sell the energy that is at our facilities. So that's the long-term growth plan for BW. I'm currently working on roughly 45 megawatts of projects in this similar stage. So there's 10 here, and there's a handful of other projects throughout New York State that are in a similar setup like this one is. My counterpart is also working on about 35 to 45 megawatts of similar community distributed generation projects. We have 25 megawatts that are already approved in New York State. One of them is just to the north here in Alba. That went through the full approval process through the town, through the county, and we have a similar project just south of here in Pavilion as well. That's in a similar phase as this. It's already been through county review and the county supported it. Big difference in why the county supported that one and not this one was simply because the laws are different. As the town board member mentioned, Stafford does have some of the most restrictive solar laws in the county. They are far and above more stringent than others. So when it came to some of the setbacks that we were talking about, the county felt that it was in the town's interest to go back and look at that law, and if they decide to change it, that would be a better approach. Because the variances we're asking for were not something that they felt they could support. It was a town decision to make. But we did get a lot of great comments from the county as to the site design, and that we took a lot of time and energy into why we're asking for the very specific variances. And coming into this town, having worked for 2 different solar companies, I know some of the main points that you face in a town are, we usually like the idea of solar. Most folks say, just not in my backyard, or what are you gonna do to screen it? Those end up being 2 of the biggest issues. So when we looked at projects, BW specifically, we actually had 4 parcels in mind for this town. 2 of them were down by Hanson Gravel, and the other 2 were up here. We like to look at the town comprehensive plan, figure out what the look and feel of the town is. Do they have any zoning codes? And try to fit a project like this where the town has identified areas that they want it. So we looked at the comprehensive plan and saw that there was only a handful of parcels, like 3 or 4 to be exact, that were identified as industrial park area that allowed for solar. So we said, okay, well, writing's on the wall, let's not jam a square peg into a round hole, let's take the 2 parcels the town has already identified as zoned properly for solar or commercial. That's how we ended up where we are, along with some of the utility infrastructure that's here, really limits where a project like this could go. So we looked at that, started doing our due diligence as a company. We reached out to the utility company, figured out if it was feasible to put a project there, worked with the landowners to identify where they felt comfortable with a project like this. And we started designing under that guidance, reached out to the code officer, which we always do, reached out to the town attorney, reached out to several folks in the town as well, and just got some input and started putting together what we felt was a comprehensive packet that incorporated the intent of the law with some of the setbacks. We try to design things as a company that are as minimally invasive as possible. And if we get into the actual setbacks, I think I'll be able to explain some of that tonight. But as a company, we do look at all these projects as a long-term investment. And hopefully we're good stewards of the land, just like anyone else who owns land in this town is. And we're good neighbors, we're good members of the community, we pay our bills on time and contribute to the tax base. And at the end of the day, if there are complaints or concerns, we respond to them as quickly as possible and put that in our operation and maintenance plan so that we're accountable for anything that does happen on the property, and work with the landowners as well so that they can continue farming it in the manner that they have for almost 80 years as a family.
Hey, Mr. Leyland, would you ask Mr. Huntington to see what he gained, what they gained, what the woods gained by having these changes made?
I don't think that's, what?
I'll be honest, it's less about what we gain in terms of.
Well, if there's going to be an enlargement of the site,
If
how
there's
many more?
no, there is not an enlargement of the site.
It doesn't enlarge, you don't enlarge it by changing the perimeters?
It's a one-time variance for
No.
this
particular property.
She's asking why can't they do it under the same laws that you have now?
Yeah.
Too small?
I can actually answer that. We could. It would just negatively impact the family's ability to maintain their cattle operation and also farm effectively. So if you add a 200-foot setback around the entire property, the project is actually on 2 separate parcels. And in the town law, it says that there has to be a 200-foot setback from each property line. So there's 2 parcels here. There's a property line going down the middle. Both parcels are owned by the same person, same family. And we want to build, so in the instance where we're asking for a 0-foot setback, we want to build these in an efficient way where we're sharing that property line and sharing a fence. If we follow the letter of the law, we would have 200 feet on either side and a 400-foot dead zone that has to be incorporated as the buffer, and the owners can't farm that because it's technically part of our site plan. So in specific areas, like against the back property line where it's shared with another cornfield that the family also farms, we're asking for that to be reduced from 200 to 100. That brings the array further back away from the main road along the college side. And again, brings it further away from the populated areas. In the very back of it, we're asking it reduced from 200 to 50 feet because it butts up to a railroad track. And in our mind, that would be the most logical place. If you're going to push this thing away from the road, you would push it towards the railroad tracks. It already has natural barriers with tree line. It's already raised up, so it actually makes a natural visual barrier in itself, and again, pulls it away from the road. If we get into the site designs, I can show you that the family does have a cattle business that they run. Their grandchildren are in the 4-H and they do showings, future farmers, all of that stuff. So if we can consolidate this design away from the road to the back of the property, it allows them to farm the front of it more efficiently rather than having, a pocket of farming here, a pocket here, a pocket there. They can plant a large field up in front, and it doubles as efficiency for them, but also a visual buffer for us on top of what we're going to add outside of the fencing. So we can, in essence, do this project without the 200-foot variances being changed. The 1,000-foot setback is one that I've said from the very beginning, almost makes it impossible to do solar anywhere in town. And so that's the primary one we're looking for. But the 200-foot setback variances is mainly so that the family can still farm. We could do the project and fit the same exact size, but it would in essence, stop them from having their 80-plus-year-old family farm operational. It would eat up all of their land.
I'll finish my 3 minutes. How many acres will they be using as farming on that? How many acres will they be using as farming when?
I know there's like 56 acres that they're using for solar. I don't know what the total.
What's the 2 parcels are like 130 acres,
Okay.
so subtract 56 from 130.
Okay.
And some of it isn't farmable either. There is a stream that goes through there. We're maintaining that stream as a natural corridor for animals and also for foliage. So there's a few pieces of it that can't be farmed just because of topography and natural environmental conditions. But the remainder of it, if we can get the variances, would be used for cattle and farming.
I reached out to the CSX because in one of your presentations, you said that the railroad did not have an issue with how close we got to them. I reached out to see it because our attorney told us it was a waste of my time, but I figured it was a good waste of time. I reached out to him after I got kicked around to about 4 different people. The final answer I got was, well, if we have a problem with that, we'll get back to you. Well, they never got back to me, so I don't know what all that means, but
We work with them all the time on railroad crossings to access parcels. Obviously, being near railroads, being near highways, areas where most likely people are not going to have, residence is the goal. We're trying to not build these right on top of folks. So we actually deal with CSX all the time. And as long as you're not encroaching on any of their setbacks or any of their facilities, you can go right up to the property line and there's no issue.
How many active projects does BW Solar have today running?
We have 25 megawatts that are currently approved throughout New York State. I'm specifically managing about 35 to 45 in a version like this, and my counterpart, who also does development, is doing the same.
They're active today, the projects are running? In other words, there's electricity being delivered out of these locations?
They're not built yet. We're waiting to build them as a collective. It is easier and more cost-effective to build them as a whole because they are considered smaller projects. They're individual 5 megawatts here, 10 megawatts there. So when you do go to build them, we try to do it, it's like shopping at BJ's. If you can buy the panels in bulk and get them shipped here, cost-wise for construction, it's easier to build them.
So there's no real track record, is what you're saying, as far as maintaining property and executing on what you're talking about delivering?
In terms of built projects, not yet.
Somebody had their hand up here.
Yes, is there a map of how this is laid out on the property that we could look at?
Yes.
Yes,
You
we
got all
have,
kinds
we have
of-
several here.
It's got more
There's a couple more up here. You're happy to come take a look at them.
The ones on the table show the array on there, or is it just on yours?
Yes, the one up here shows the array. It also shows the setback, the 200-foot setback, outlined in green as well.
If this were to get approved, you guys, the railroad access, where would you guys be coming in to build that? As someone who is on the opposite side of the railroad, I want to make sure that this won't interfere with my land and my property.
For sure, we are actually staying on the western side of the railroad. We're not crossing it at all. So we're coming basically from what everyone calls College Drive. We're using the current access road that the family has for their farm, so we're not creating additional curb cuts. What we'd be doing is building up that gravel road just a little bit more, because we will have some telephone poles that get installed. During construction, which usually takes a year to 2 years at most, depending on weather, is when you see the bulk of the increased traffic. After that, there's very little traffic added to it. It's very self-contained. We would most likely be looking to hire some local folks for maintenance work, lawn mowing, snow removal, any chance we can to find local folks to do fencing, gravel, things of that nature as well. But once it's built, it's really kind of does its own thing.
How many people are you looking for? I mean, looking to have to hire?
Usually it's 3 to 4 per 5 megawatt project. So since these are co-located, we can obviously have those folks do that same work on both projects.
We're gonna hire like four people.
Yes.
Kathy?
Mike, you mentioned the acreage was like 64 and 64. So their whole farm is only like 127 acres? Oh, how much acreage? Oh, like where I go by it.
It's 28 and 28, the two solar arrays.
Yes, it's roughly like 28 and then one's 30.12.
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, I know when I go by and I see the farm and the little huts for the little cows, right? Where are the other cows? They're to the right, coming down College Road, it would be to the right of your barn? That's more land?
We keep them in a barnyard and fenced in area.
In a pasture.
Yeah.
Right, well, that's what I was wondering. So the 127 acres isn't their whole farm, that's
No.
just where they want to put the solar?
Correct.
In that area, yes.
In 2018, the town of Stafford, with a lot of cooperation, did an intensive study as far as making the Part 2 General Legislation, Chapter 143, Solar Energy Facilities. May I ask, whom of you on the Zoning Board of Appeals have read this law?
I've read the entire solar law.
Okay.
If you want me to quote it, check
No, no,
reverse,
no,
that's not
that's-
gonna happen, but
No,
I've read it.
no, I have it right here, actually.
We've all had copies of it, so.
You have copies of it, but how many of you have read it and digested it? So,
That's a loaded question.
that's a loaded question. So, section 143-4, section B. Stafford's comprehensive plan desires to maintain the pastoral, rural nature of this region. An industrial solar energy facility is in conflict with the culture and character of the community. That is what the law says. I have it right here. Also, section 143.7-D, there's an application fee that has an escrow account of $150,000 for any solar situation. Has that been, is there $150,000 in escrow for this right now? Because that's in the law.
There's not, that would be at the building permit phase.
Yeah, no, because it's right in these solar energy facilities. Again, application fee is $150,000, and then of course, the fees would have to be paid out of that. Also, section 143.7-G requires umbrella coverage of $10 million, which includes the entire town of Stafford, employees et al., and also general liability. Has that been established? This is in the local solar law that I've been a Stafford resident for 24 years, and I remember all of this happening in 2018. It was a big thing. And if these haven't been established with that huge thing in 2018, how can this even be happening right now?
Well, as far as the escrow, I would assume that it's paid after.
No, that's the application fee. Please look. Please look. I have it right here. Please
Okay.
look. It's the application fee.
That's fine.
Has been established.
Krista, how would you feel if this solar farm was right next to your property?
I've actually considered putting my own in.
Okay.
Because, just a personal one to help offset bills, not, I haven't looked at
At an industrial type
industrial
one.
one. But I've considered like on my home and.
Well, sure, well, of course. Yeah, but if
I've
it was
thought
an
about-
industrial one right next to you, how would you feel about that? Leslie, how would you feel about that?
To be, well, can I finish?
You would move, exactly. So here,
Wait a
at
second,
this,
wait.
Can
Oh.
I finish?
sure.
At the beginning of this, when I first heard that they were coming to town, I envisioned them up on, who passed away that lived in the big yellow house?
John Kemp.
Kemp's. His property is just one hedgerow away, and I envisioned it on there and dreaded the thought of seeing that every day. But then I realized that global warming is real, and I feel like we all are gonna need to, we need to make change so that we can sustain life.
Okay. And Leslie, please tell me how you would feel with an industrial solar project right next to your
I
property.
said I would move,
You
because
would,
I would want to look at it every day.
okay.
I don't,
and
it
so
doesn't
then-
mean that I don't believe that there's good things for it. I wouldn't live there. I would choose to move, because that's my personal.
Okay, so the hard work that our Staffordians did in 2018 with the application fee with an escrow of $150,000, that hasn't been met. And there was a reason that that was established, because as I stated, the comprehensive plan desires to maintain the pastoral, rural nature of this region, and industrial solar energy facility is in conflict with the culture and character of the community. That is the bulk of that.
And I will repeat what I said in the very beginning. Every variance that comes in front of us is basically trying to get relief to what our current zoning laws are. So this is no different than any other variance that we listen to. If it's somebody wants to build a barn within 20 feet of the property line, when our code says that it's 30, we look at it and make a determination if it's best for the customer, the homeowner, and for the town of Stafford. The decisions aren't made just.
This is true, but since that law was adopted by the town of Stafford, you would have to have that law that requires the $150,000 in escrow amended by the town board, not by the zoning appeals board.
Don't know that.
Well, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, but that's not really a ZBA issue either.
No.
That's what I'm getting at.
Right.
That's what I'm
The
getting
second
at.
point I'd like to make, and I mentioned this last meeting, it wasn't anywhere near the amount of people that last meeting was here, just to offer some perspective. You know, this is an industrial zone area, right? So, somebody could come in and build a manufacturing facility. There's probably a variety of industrial type complexes that could go there. So, you know, I would just ask, you know, keep that in mind as you're looking at this. You know, solar complexes, solar farms, you know, don't really demand a lot of services from the town. No traffic, you know, sewers, all that. I mean, somebody could come in there very easily and put up a 2-3 story manufacturing facility.
May I ask what the health hazards are with this facility being there?
Studies have shown that there are no health hazards associated with it. When a solar farm is functioning properly and maintained properly, there is no leaching into fields. There's no chemicals being released. There's no omittance of chemicals into the air. And part of our duty is to make sure that a facility is operating at a high efficiency. So if any of those things were to happen, it would mean that our facility is not operating properly, and it would be incumbent on us to make sure it is, because we get paid based on the electricity coming from it, and we want to make sure that it's operating at a high level.
Has an environmental impact study been done, or is it required?
No, not by us.
It is required as part of seeker, so we'll be notifying every organization that has some type of jurisdictional authority, so that includes DEC, Army Corps of Engineers, DOT, local county officials. Everyone will be notified as part of that seeker process. We haven't gotten to that stage yet. That would be part of what we do on the next steps with the town board.
Bill, when that comes in front of you guys in the planning board, that's, at that time you request that, correct?
Well, this is a special use permit that actually is issued by the town board.
Okay.
They may refer back to us for recommendation, but it's definitely would be a town board function.
Okay.
May I read section 143-7-D? The SEF escrow account, the applicant owner-operator shall pay to the town of Stafford a non-refundable application fee. The town board is required to obtain engineering, economic impact, environmental impact, and other professional services to aid it in the review of any submitted SEF application. These costs and other expenses incurred by the town of Stafford are reimbursable only from the escrow account, not the application fee. The amount of the escrow account will be determined by consulting with the appropriate professional organizations. There will be a minimum amount of $150,000 in the account at all times. Again, section 143-7D. Right. I have internet access. These are the laws.
Hi, I'm sorry, I've got a few questions and really quick. First of all, I would rather have this an industrial bunch of buildings that are bringing a bunch of traffic, but if this plan were to go through, do you guys already know who you'd be hiring? Would this be going through a union? Would it be going through locals? What would be the plan on that side? Would this affect any, let's say someone wants to build and it's around those properties, would that affect the other properties that are near it?
Affected as far as what?
Let's say someone wants to put up a barn or have any sort of like housing for animals around there. Would having a solar farm affect that side on the opposite spectrum?
As far as environmentally affecting it?
Like does the law apply in reverse? Like if they need a special, permission from the zoning board to put something up within 1,000 feet of the house, and now
Right.
they've got a solar field there, and
Right.
somebody put a house within 1,000 feet of a solar field.
Would that affect, like, for example, would that affect, because we are the property line next to it?
No.
Okay.
So that does not work in reverse.
And that's exactly what the point that Tim brought up is that, let's say, let's pretend the yogurt factory that wants to build in Batavia now, if they chose to build in Stafford rather than talking to them, we wouldn't be having these discussions and they would be building it.
And they'd be hiring 200 people.
Irregardless, we're talking about, she's talking about environmentally or whatever, that could happen.
Well, but my first question was for the construction of the solar panels. Do you guys go through a specific company? Does this go to the union for bids? How does that work?
So typically, the electrical side of things, because it is higher voltage, does have to go through certain certified organizations. Typically ends up being union jobs because it is high voltage. Everything else, we try to find locally. We are a private company, so we don't have to go through the bidding process. But what I've done in the past is work with chambers of commerce in the county or a town, post the job online, let folks know what we're looking for. If they have an opportunity to provide materials, to provide support, we're happy to do whatever we can to hire locally in that process. And to your point of building something, if it's on your own property, you have the right to build whatever you want on your property as long as it fits within zoning laws.
Kathy?
Are they seeking a pilot on this? Are they gonna be paying taxes, or is this going to be a pilot project where you're not gonna pay taxes?
So a pilot is a form of taxes. It's a payment in lieu of taxes.
Right.
Because
How would that work?
we would enter into that with the Genesee County Economic Development Agency. They have a pretty standard process for it, and it is $6,000 per megawatt, which is split between the town, school district, and county.
Again, reading the law, section 143.7, permit requirements, section 4A. The escrow account will be set up by the applicant, owner, operator at the time of the SEF permit application. And I'll pause. Was an escrow account set up when the application was filed?
It has not been yet.
Then, according to the law of Stafford, it's not valid. Okay, and let me continue. This escrow account will be at a financial institution approved by the town of Stafford solely in the name of the town of Stafford to be managed by the town of Stafford or a designee appointed by the Stafford Town Board. So in effect, according to Stafford law, this is not a valid application at all because these conditions have not been met. And I have internet, I'm reading it right off the town website.
Okay, so that's just a statement, not a question for you. I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of these escrow accounts in any other town in the county, state, or country?
No. $150,000 in an escrow account controlled by the town, even in a decommissioning sense, has never been established where the town controls the escrow account, because in essence, you'd be taking the taxes from it. So I can't say across New York State that's true. In all the projects I've done or been associated with, I've never seen something of that nature. Not to say that towns haven't, implemented it. It is, you can adopt any law and have a solar law with some of these elements. It doesn't mean that a solar project is going to go to that town. It also doesn't mean that it's necessarily viable. So there's many towns that adopt a solar law and put poison pills in them. And the intention is we have a solar law and, for all intents and purposes, we are following the New York State General Municipal Law and putting a law in place, but we're going to put 1, 2, 3, 5 requirements that make it next to impossible to actually have that facility in that town. So any town can pass any law. That's not necessarily a defense to say that it is normal or viable. But I will say that among some of the other pieces in the Stafford law, we will hopefully be working with the town board to see if there is an opportunity to find a common ground and potentially amend that.
Sure, you got a question?
Yes.
Okay.
As you proceed with these projects and everything, you just don't make moves willy-nilly without consulting your attorneys and lawyers, is that correct?
Correct.
And you have to follow what they tell you to do.
Yes, along with the town attorneys, we follow their lead as well and try not to step afoul of any process.
Thank you.
Ron?
Just to put things in perspective, refer back to our planned unit development law. There's a requirement for the same type of account to be set up. So you can ask Tony Cole how he likes having 100,000 set aside to basically protect the town from him not finishing the development. And that's the whole intent of it. So is it unusual? No. It's right in our other laws.
Has Tony Cole put that money in escrow?
I believe he has, hasn't he? I think he put it,
I mean, he's applied, so.
But he's under the same.
Right.
Same requirements, so they're not unusual requirements. But, while we're talking about because we keep alluding to the fact that our requirements are unusual. If you look back at the history, we started working on this in around 2017. So a couple years before BW existed, we were already working on the solar law. We had a study group. I believe we advertised to have people participate. We had local participants, including farmers, a few other people. Do you remember who was on there? Bernie Cochran was on there. Yeah. So that took probably a year and a half for them to develop their report. We took their report and tried to match it up to a law. Once we had a viable law, we sent it through a board review along with the attorney, because some of it duplicated the state seeker law. The attorney advised us to cut those sections out and follow the seeker, so that reduced the town law in size. Then just prior to passing it, we had the planning board go through it. They gave us 42 recommendations, of which we did 34 of them, so it was reviewed there. And then it was passed on June 10th, 2019. Since then, the town of Leroy asked for a copy of it, and they used parts of our law to develop their solar law. The town of Alexander never asked for it, but they have a law that's word for word identical. So, no, it's not that uncommon. Or at least my opinion is it's not uncommon.
Perhaps the poison pill, as you call it, was intentional.
I have no idea.
I wasn't involved, I don't know
Well,
either.
I wasn't either, so.
Yeah, that's possible.
Dan, is that
What's
$150,000 escrow, is that, how's your company, maybe you can't answer that right now, but is that a hurdle for you guys to get over?
No, we would meet that burden if we came to, the actual application being reviewed by the town board. And would take every step as it comes in the logical order. Right now, the variance is the first step in the
Has
process.
there been no application put in for this?
If we could just do one at a time, I'm trying to answer board members.
Well, I realize that, but I'm addressing what you're talking
Well,
about.
sure,
And
he's
I-
answering my question though.
Yeah, and I will, because technically a town, public meeting is where the public voices their concern. It's not a Q&A. So I'm answering questions because I've come to this town for the last 6 months and done exactly this at every other board meeting. So as long as we can just stay civil and I'll make sure not to interrupt you, and just do one question at a time. So we are following the roadmap that we worked on with our attorneys, and with county representatives as well, and speaking with some of the folks here in town. This was the very first step. If we do progress past this step, we would look at all the next pieces and make sure we met every piece of the application for requirement to move forward.
And yes, there has been an application submitted for both the projects.
And according to the law, 143-74D, a minimum escrow account of $150,000 with the application. Sorry, that's me.
She's got a point. Yeah, I mean, what are we doing here then?
Yeah, then all this would be moot at this point.
It would be moot, because if that $150,000 were to be waived, it would have to be by the town board, along with the insurance policy that's required according to the 2018 Solar Energy Facilities Rules.
Oh,
To piggyback on what Ron was saying about the solar research committee that the town had, this notebook is, this notebook is part 2 of 3 notebooks that were presented to the town board. And this one is about the science and the negative impacts, the loss of farmland and the loss of property values. And I was just wondering if you were all acquainted with the contents
We've got
of what's in it.
Actually,
I'm
I was
through it.
only provided with 2
yeah, I had 2 books,
and not a third.
yes.
And the science in the one I saw was very questionable. It even questioned whether global warming was real. And there were thick articles about arsenic, but then no connection of how arsenic has anything to do with solar panels. Just these big, thick documents of negative things, but no correlation to solar arrays.
I believe that the correlation is the content of the chemical makeup of the solar panels, whatever it takes to.
But I didn't find that in one of these binders. I never found the connection that this law was supposed to be based on.
That one was in the second binder, right?
I don't know what order they were in.
I don't know, I just went through both of them.
I came across the global warming too, and I would like to say that that is an opinion, whether there is real global warming or whether there isn't, and we could sit here all night and decide whether, or try to decide whether there was or there wasn't. And so stating that there is global warming does not mean that there truly is. You say it your way, and I would say it wrong.
Of course she does. A question on the health issue, because that's one of my biggest concerns. This electronic magnetic force that I've been hearing about with all these solar farms, is that part of it? Is that what your rays pull down or let off? These magnetic forces?
Not to my knowledge of any impact. I haven't read every medical study. But to my knowledge, there are no electromagnetic forces coming off of the array.
Okay.
It's collecting energy, putting it into
And it doesn't
copper
affect the
lines.
ground around it?
No,
I
it's
see a lot
actually-
of trees just dying around all these solar farms we have all around. So I just wonder if something is
That's more of a
doing something
maintenance.
to the land.
Are
Oh,
you
it's more
planting
maintenance.
it properly? Are you maintaining it? Is there any type of, pest or something getting involved with it? Are you planting them too close together? But that would be incorporated in our operation and maintenance plan to replace anything that happens.
And medical research, I'm assuming, would be sought out through the seeker? The seekers, that they handle that?
It's more of an environmental side.
Environmental part, okay, which is part of the seeker.
Okay. I think the only thing I've read, and you may have alluded to it in one of the 4 meetings ago, is that the electromagnetic issue might be relative to the number and size of transformers. They're, transmitting the power from the panels to the grid. I don't even know if that's even a thing, but I think you mentioned in one of the meetings that there was minimal transfer, I guess, if you will, or I don't know, I'm off in areas I don't know a lot about, but I remember you addressing that a little bit.
I have
That's
not
what made
seen
me
any
research
studies
that.
where there was any significant reports on any type of impact to an individual. And in terms of transformers, any hardware and equipment we have on site, no one in the general public should ever be close enough to it to have any type of effect. If they were, they'd be entering into a secure locked fence and trespassing past, signs that clearly indicate not to go past this certain area, because we are by law required to have each 5 megawatt array encompassed in a chain link fence with a lock key.
So how's that affect the animals around there, the deer, whatever? I mean, they can walk right up to it, get affected. I go out hunting, I shoot this deer that's contaminated.
No, as I just said, I've never seen any study that would indicate
Well, I haven't
that
either,
was an
but
effect.
doesn't mean it's not gonna happen.
Well, you also have fencing around the entire.
Yeah, and there's a 20-foot gap between the fence and the closest point of the array, because we need space for service vehicles to get in there as well.
Mike, I gotta go back, was it Ron back there? Just I had a couple of questions. Relative to the real property value protection plan and the 1,000-foot setback, when that went through, did the town attorney provide any guidance on, specifically on those two, as being potentially excessive or,
No.
nothing?
Jimmy, Don, do you remember them raising an issue with that? Don't forget, you have to set it for across the entire town. So,
Now, your EMF, the transformers that you're going to have at the farm complex, they're all enclosed in metal. And EMF does not go through metal. You have more EMF at your house from your TV, your radios, your lights. You're constantly bombarded at the home, and with the wires, your wires are going to be buried.
Correct. After the interconnection, the point of interconnection where the poles connect to the actual utility infrastructure, after the last pole goes underground, it's in conduit, and it goes to the transformer, which is sitting on a concrete pad similar to this table.
And those are grounded.
Yep, and it's similar to what you would see any one of those transformer boxes that's green. Very similar to that.
And most of the EMF is in the wires up on top.
Correct.
Thank you.
So, nothing personal, but wouldn't we or you want data, not his say-so that it's not harmful?
I spent time researching and.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get that impression. I thought we were just relying on his say-so.
No, we all did lots of homework.
I didn't know.
We've been
I
inundated
did.
with manuals and documents, and, I mean, they've done a lot of work on this. A lot of work.
Just to save some time here, you're saying a lot about your attorneys and that. Have your attorneys read the town law so that we know that we're going about this in the right way? Because it sounds like there seems to be some confusion as to the process, you're saying we're gonna do this process first, then we'll do that. She's saying the law says that that should already be done. I would think that your attorneys would probably look at each town's law going into a project and maybe, you know, meet the requirements. And I'm just trying to figure out if we're supposed to be here or not.
Yeah, so
And
we,
the town attorney,
yeah,
our town attorney, I don't know.
we reviewed this with our attorneys, as well as the engineering firm that's doing the work. Both groups reviewed the law. Both groups helped us put together a roadmap of what the critical path was, so what are the very first steps. And there were elements in the law that we felt needed to be addressed first. And to your point, we did consult with them, external legal resources and internal. And they all assured me that the process we were following was the right approach, and that there were different checks and balances where if for whatever reason the town felt this wasn't appropriate, the town board is the next step. And they could put a halt to the project until certain elements were met, and could tell us we can't vote on anything until you meet these requirements, at which time we would do exactly that in order to progress the project forward.
Section 143(7)(d), the application fee is $150,000.
Aren't her 3 minutes up?
Yeah, we,
No, because it's
no,
been
we
a while.
will,
But, so no, they didn't read the law then, apparently. And also, section B, 143-4, section B, Stafford's comprehensive plan desires to maintain the pastoral rural nature of this region. An industrial solar energy facility is in conflict with the culture and character of this community. So, number one, these people in 2017-18 that developed this law spent a bunch of time doing this, number one. And I thank them for their time. But since they spent this time, we need to follow the directions that are here in our town law. At this point, the town board would have to change that $150,000 escrow fee in order for this to continue, amongst other things.
That's a question that we will get answered. But, to go back to your other point, town board said that it was permitted in industrial. This is industrial.
This is, I'm reading you the industrial parts of this.
That's what I'm saying, so.
And again, Town of Stafford, Part 2, General Legislation, Chapter 143, Solar Energy Facilities. It's, I could read you the whole thing, but that would be ridiculous, so.
Correct.
And it could be an interpretation of that law also.
It reads very similar to our planned unit development. We would not ask for the escrow until we actually start to consider the application. My understanding is we don't kick off considering the application, going after the seeker, doing any of these items until these variances are resolved. So,
and that's my understanding also.
So, and many of the things everybody raises as risks, that is part of the seeker. So, if you're worried about EMF, or if you're worried about stray current, if you're worried about leaching from the panels, that is all supposed to be handled during the seeker. As a matter of fact, I asked that the study group that did the original study participate with us in the seeker. And if you look at it, that's why you need the escrow account at the beginning, right there, as you do the seeker, because you may very well want to call in experts that are independent from the company to complete the seeker. But to me, that's how it all fits in. So right now, we are not considering the application right now until these are resolved. Do I have the sequence of events correct?
That's how I interpret it.
All right.
So they've applied for a variance, not for the project.
And if I can just piggyback off that, the variances are gonna dictate the footprint in which we can assure that that's the design we're moving forward with. So the town board can't reasonably do all the work that they have to do if we can't even decide where the footprint of this thing is gonna lie. So that's why we're at the variance part first, to determine, okay, you can build here, you can't build there. Once we know that, then we can say, okay, let's outline the footprint. You know, if we have to alter these designs, we'll alter these designs, resubmit them to the town board. And now we have a clear defined footprint that we can review everything from without changes going from there. So I appreciate his comment, and that would be the next step, is we finalize where the footprint is, make sure it's designed properly to fit those parameters. Then we go to the town board, make sure all of our ducks are in a row, meet all the requirements, and that would kick off.
Well, I think that's a very good educational point there, because I'll bet in the 18 years, 19 years I've done this, probably 30% of the applications that come before the board, maybe 40, are just this, you know, trying to get variances to see if it's feasible, doable. You know, it's, if you're gonna spend money, you wanna make sure you can get these first. And that sounds kind of simple, but that's kind of what it boils down to sometimes.
One of the questions I have for you, Deanne, is that if what our town attorney has told me that there's nothing that, there's no variance that we can grant on the 2,500 feet for the real property value. And this is a question you may not be able to answer right now. Is that a deal killer for you guys?
If the board can't offer a variance for that, we would look at other mechanisms. The way it's written in the law is in an open-ended way. What I can say that it incorporates over 100 individual properties and property owners. It goes north of the highway. It goes a significant portion of the way into Batavia. And just identifying those specific houses that fall within the Stafford property is over 100 houses. To create some type of agreement with every single one of those homeowners is something I've never heard of on any project I've been involved in New York State. On this specific project, there is actually only one homeowner that's adjoining the property. So every other homeowner, residential property that is, all the other properties are farmed. So any agreement that would be done would require so many contracts and so many variations of a contract, it could quadruple the cost of the project just in the beginning phases alone, trying to secure agreements with every single residence that may apply.
Well, it also includes, 2,500 feet also includes portions of the Batavia Country Club.
Correct. So the variations there of property owners, commercial, residential, the sheer legality of New York State when it comes to liability and insurances. I may be saying too much here, but the sheer ability of someone to prove within 10 years that our project was the cause of their home being devalued from what they believe it is almost impossible to prove. And obviously, if it's something of a significant magnitude dollar-wise, it would be something that we would be forced to defend in court. So the logistics of it, I completely understand the intention of it. And I've said this at every meeting. I understand the intention of the real property protection plan. I really do. But the logistics of it in New York State, being a highly lawyer and insurance state, it's next to impossible to get any of those agreements realistically flushed out with a dollar amount that is plausible, that's enforceable, or able to be, negotiated 10 years down the road. It's just one of the biggest question marks I've ever seen in the law.
Okay, you answered my question.
What can you say though to the neighbors that don't have the option that Leslie feels that she may move. People that have been there for 20 years or have come to the age of 70 and they're still very viable, but they don't want to move, or they can't afford to move, or...
Are there any neighbors that are sitting here tonight? Well, I mean, when I'm talking neighbors, I'm talking, I mean, you're the other side of the railroad tracks, I understand that. I mean,
Across
there's,
the tracks.
what's that?
We're across the tracks.
You're across the tracks. So there's no neighbors that are,
There's one, I've already spoken to him.
well, that's what I was asking. I know there's a couple that are over there.
Yep. Donald Hawkins, he's been in his house for 30-plus years. He has a big bay window right out front. He's actually here today. If there's anyone who, you know, I would sympathize with, it is him. He has a beautiful home across the street that does overlook a beautiful farm field. I can't argue that fact. I had family, my uncle's a dairy farmer. I love going out there. I love being in nature. I'm a hunter as well. Love golf as well. Love being in nature. So I can sympathize with, you know, his concerns for what the project has. And I just want to say one thing, and then I'll hand it over to you, sir. The variances we are asking for to pull it away from the road in which he lives on, specifically the 200 feet down to 0 and the eastern side, 200 foot to 100 feet, would actually bring the solar array away from the road in such a manner that it would actually allow his view, at least 50% of it, to stay farm fields. If those variances aren't granted, the only place we can bring the remainder of those panels to follow the law is up into that bend, which would, in essence, eat up his entire view. And I'm more than happy to commit additional resources to that corner and to that area, work with you specifically to say, you know, within 6 months of us building this project, if the screening isn't adequate, we'll put together another plan and work with you specifically to find ways to screen it in a better manner. Because that is not lost on me. I hear it all the time, and I think you know, this project is special in that we're not surrounded by homes, but you know, to that point, Mr. Harkin does live right across the street.
Any input?
No, just information.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Just quick question. If you look at the influx, if you will, or construction of solar farms in the last 10 years, are we at the peak, or have we not reached the peak yet, in your opinion, just from what you've seen development-wise?
That's a great question. So it depends on the town. I can say across New York State, you are going to see a lot of projects that have already been approved or in the process of being approved. You're going to see a large, I don't know if this helps me to say it, there's going to be a boom in building of these projects. A lot of them have been approved but have sat on the shelf for the last year. What Stafford has going for it, whether this is a plus or a minus, if you look at the hosting capacity maps that the utility provides, you cannot build the type of solar that we're doing, community distributed generation, the 5 megawatts and smaller, unless you have the current electrical infrastructure to allow it. I checked the hosting capacity map, and I would be happy to have a seminar and freely show everyone what's available to see on the utility company's website. There are only a certain number of circuits in this town that can host a 5 megawatt to 10 megawatt project, and we already have the capacity. So unless someone upgrades the lines, which is extremely expensive and what everyone avoids, you're not going to see other projects like ours. What you could potentially see is what they call a 94 or an Article 10 project. Those are utility scale projects that, frankly, when you impose more restrictive laws and you limit the number of smaller distributed generation projects, it actually incentivizes larger companies to come in and look at that town. Because you're less likely to have smaller projects sprinkled throughout. You're less likely to have an educated population that has looked at the laws and potentially already applied solar to certain properties. And those 94C Article 10 projects actually go above the town. They go directly to the state, and the state would say 2,500 foot real property protection plan, 1,000 foot setback from residential, maybe even 200 foot is too onerous for a project that fits the state's mandate, and we're going to wipe those out. You do not have to follow them. You can now build a 1,000-acre solar project.
What's the breaking point in megawatts to become a project like that?
So for community distributed generation, it has to be 5 megawatts or less as an individual project.
That's for what you're doing,
Correct. You can co-locate them up to, I believe, 5 projects in one spot. They all have to have individual interconnections. They all have to be individually fenced. They all have to be their separate LLC entity, usually their own tax parcel, things of that nature. In this town specifically, there is no more capacity on the 3 circuits that you have in this town to host any additional community distributed generation. And your zoning laws already dictate that you can't have solar outside of the parcels that we're right near. So in essence, everything we're doing tonight is predominantly going to be only for these 2 projects, unless someone comes in with very deep pockets and is willing to upgrade a substation or power lines to the 3-phase size that you need. Now, you could do a 1 megawatt potentially on a one-off line. But again, I'm happy to show the hosting capacity map that's freely available to everyone that we use to find specific areas to have solar. And I'll show you exactly how they report it. I'll show you how you can look up if there's a project coming to your town. Happy to.
Well, and part of the reason I asked that question is getting back to the whole valuation, or home value protection issue, is that if we haven't quite hit or if we're still on the upside, or going up the upside, if you will, I don't know if there's enough data out there to even take a reasonable stab at saying, what reading I've done says there is no measurable impact on replacement properties and home values, but again, how much data is behind that? And I think in the coming years, there may be better data that either supports it or negates it. I don't know.
There's a lot of information out there for both sides. Yeah. And again, a home is dependent on what someone's willing to pay for it, and there's a multitude of factors in that. I can't begin to surmise all the elements someone would take into it. Yeah.
Ron?
Just to, when you look at the law, it's very open on what type of studies can be used. And it leaves that in the hands of the solar company to develop those. It also requires that the homeowner has to prove that their loss of value is because of the solar. It's not an easy road, but it is something to counteract what we've been seeing from the industry. And I've said it at other town meetings. What we're seeing from the industry is what drove us to write the law the way we did. I mean, you just have to look at 5 corners. And that's just an ugly setup. It's right on top of people's property. It's not being rolled out well. What we're going to start to see, and yes, the state can, if you have the line capacity, the state can take it right over. And what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of people boxed, where they look out their front, their back, their sides, and they're going to see solar panels. You can see that in the preliminary sightings in Byron already, that you're going to have properties just boxed right in. And talking to some of the landowners that, since I know some of them that have been boxed in, is anybody doing anything for you? And the answer is no. So what we wanted to do by developing this very open-ended and as a matter of fact, I'm kind of surprised with as open-ended as it is, that they want us to get rid of it completely, to prevent what's gonna go on in these other towns. Now, as it turns out, do we have the line capacity to, I mean, if they're coming in minimum, where they're just gonna come in where there's line capacity, get panels on the ground, well, then there isn't much to do in Stafford. There is a bit of logic that says, if you're gonna go, if these things are based on line capacity and industrial zoning usually requires big power to run industry, they go very well together. And I thought that was a good piece of logic that we put into the law. Now, you may very well have people, because these lines, I mean, that's the other thing, these lines run through numerous landowners. So you may have multiple people that could take advantage of it, but the minute one person does, they have just used up the line capacity, and that's it. So again, if you know, I spent a lot of work on this solar law, and especially the homeowner guarantee. It gives a lot of freedom to the company. It gives a lot of burden to the homeowner to do it. And it's based on real live maps in this area, 5 miles down the road, that shows what happens when you don't have it. I don't know if anybody's looked at the maps for Byron. Look at the Shaw property on 262.
And I see that the town of Batavia is re-looking at their solar laws.
Yeah, they ran wide open. And 5 corners is what you get when you run.
Well, the one that's west of Batavia doesn't look too good either.
All right.
Yeah.
I actually just want to make a comment for the public record. In the law, it's stated that the whole point of the solar law was to keep Stafford rural. And I think these variances that are in question tonight are really pertinent to keeping the area rural, because the variances would allow that farm to continue farming. I'll be honest, my son's 13. He's very invested in the FFA. My whole career is in agriculture, and we want to see agriculture continue. And by allowing these variances, it would allow agriculture to continue in the area. And I just wanted to make that known on public record that they're not asking for things to change drastically. What they're trying to do is pass these variances so that we can continue some agriculture in the area. So that when you drive by that same farm, you're going to see that farm still being there maybe 200 years from now. You know? So that's just, I wanted to make that note that that's the point of these variances, is so that we can continue agriculture in the area.
Thank you.
Is there anything in the application what the solar panels are made of, or is it just an application for a footprint?
Just an application for footprint.
Yeah, we would go into those details in the building permit phase. That's when we would identify all the very specific elements as to the brand, make, and model of the panels, racking systems, wiring, construction timetables, and everything we submit during the seeker process is technically considered a draft for their review. And during the building permit phase, which is the next phase, probably like, if you're counting steps, it's probably 5 steps away. We would have to identify every single piece of that and then resubmit all of those drafts as final copies to the DEC for a speedies permit, to the Army Corps of Engineers, to the Ag and Markets. Ag and Markets specifically requires us to look at agriculture and how are we disturbing the land, and are we submitting a stormwater prevention, pollution prevention plan. All of those elements go into it. It's all going to be part of the application. It'll all be public record. And hopefully throughout this process we can work with the zoning board, the town board, to make sure we're meeting the high bar that you are setting. The 5 corners was referenced. I would agree. I think that project's ugly. I don't think all solar is the same. I don't think every solar company is the same. And our intent by asking for these variances is to avoid the sins of other companies. And to make sure that coming into a town, which we knew was gonna be difficult just by reading the law, not even talking to anyone, we knew we had a high bar to meet. So I actually told our engineers, we need to do certain variances here because it will give us a better look and feel if we try to achieve this. It actually makes my job a lot harder because we have to come to another board in order to get another round of approvals. If we told the Woods, hey, we don't want to do variances, we want to stay within the 200 feet, either take it or kick rocks, I don't know if I'd be sitting here. Because they were pretty adamant that they wanted a family farm. So we are taking the extra step, opening ourselves up to extra criticism and opportunities for folks to shoot the project down because we feel it's important to partner with the landowners and make it work both ways.
Yeah, I have a question. You said that these smaller solar projects, the community solar projects, actually makes, when a town has it, makes it less appealing for a large project to go in if the town has these smaller projects for like the big solar project that the state would run, like they're trying to do in Byron. It makes it less appealing for them to come in, businesses to come in to do that? Did I understand that correctly?
On occasion, yeah, because if there's already a town that's educated on the process and there's land already being used up, there's a potential that they're not going to want to co-locate another large facility. There is, as evidenced by everyone here, there is a social threshold for how much solar anyone wants in a town, right? That's obvious. And, I typically have found myself with some of our harder projects where I'm the first one through the gate with a project in a town. Other projects, if you're second or third, it's usually a little bit easier. If you're fifth, sixth, or seventh, good luck. There's just a limit to how much you can put in one area, and I agree with that. That's why I think the comprehensive plan the town has is smart. It identifies zoning areas that are allowed for solar, and that's your very first roadblock for anyone trying to get a solar project, because there's only two ways you can change a zone, and the only real way is the use variance, but that's next to impossible to achieve for rezoning. So if a town doesn't want to rezone, doesn't want to let you, they already got you, you're done.
But if a state project comes in, you said that they can override the town's laws.
Yes, those larger projects. Yeah, those larger projects connect to the utility lines.
So smaller projects would make it less appealing for a big one if it was already.
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How large are the projects in Batavia?
What's that?
How large are the projects in Batavia?
I have no idea.
To date, they're all community distributed generation. They're 5 megawatts or less typically.
I think the one that you're talking about in Five Corners, I think that's a couple of pieces of property. It's not just one piece of property. My understanding, and that's...
Right now, everything is in theory, because we don't have that many projects on the ground. When they get done with that corridor along the high tension lines, we'll have a pretty good idea of what solar will be in our area.
Right.
So, if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it now, because once everybody sees what that looks like, I don't think you ain't gonna be able to sell one of these. Just my opinion.
Dan has spoke about community distribution. Is that energy for us in this community?
It goes on the grid.
Yeah, it goes on the grid. So the larger projects, the 94C Article 10, those go on those large transmission lines. Those are going to go to places of high demand, cities, stuff like that. Community distributed generation stays locally on the local grid. So it doesn't actually travel past the set of infrastructure you have here locally. I can't say if it's going specifically to a house or to a building, but it is in this area where it's utilized on the substation.
Do we have those transmission lines nearby the wood farm?
No, not to my knowledge. They're south of there. and I believe on the other side of 90. We're not connecting to those, we're connecting to the local grid that's already in place. And that has a capacity of, I think it's 13.8 or 13.08. So that's the limit in terms of voltage that you can have on those lines, and we're putting roughly 10 megawatts.
And how can we need ones in Leroy and Five Corners and Byron and Leroy, one in Alexander? How can we need all these community projects to put all this energy on the line that's not, hasn't really been upgraded since 91 or 2?
There's actually a lot of lines out there like that. The grid is extremely outdated, extremely old, and what you're gonna see is a lot of that being updated. They actually outline that. What's that?
At whose cost?
That's the utility company, they're mandated. Some of that cost is actually on us, so when we connect a project, we actually have to pay the utility company to upgrade their infrastructure, and then they keep that equipment. So there is a threshold for how much we can pay and still have it be viable. So we do put what are called CSERs in, and those are interconnection studies for each 5 megawatt array, and that tells us how much we have to pay the utility to upgrade their own equipment so that we can connect to it. And sometimes it's in excess of $1 million, and it's just not feasible. We can't afford that. That's why I was saying earlier, the voltage capacity that you have limits how many solar projects you're gonna have, because companies building the project size that we are can't afford to pay $1 million plus just to connect the project and then also build it. You're never gonna get your return on your investment. So there is a threshold for what companies are willing to pay to connect, and thankfully we got the deli ticket to hold our place in line, and anyone else behind us is gonna most likely have to pay high enough costs that it's not financially viable for them to upgrade the utilities infrastructure to do that, on top of their already construction costs.
Linda, you do know the answer to your question. If National Grid's gonna upgrade, you know who's gonna pay for that.
I know, but
All of us.
how are we going to make them, National Grid do that? Because when I returned from Oregon in 91, they were working on the power lines that go through our property on the town, the southern Stafford potato town line road. And that power line has not been upgraded since 91.
I'm sure there's ones out there that's been a lot longer than that.
We deal with them every day, and trust me, you are not gonna make the utility do anything.
Yeah.
No one is.
No.
I mean, unless there's a power outage and, a governor or senators come down and yell, and that's about the only thing that makes a move.
And that's not
Unfortunately.
Huh?
Nothing.
No.
And just to try to get straight in my own mind, so Genesee 5, there's 200 setback variances, and Genesee 6, there's 4, correct? So I just want to get back to something stated earlier, that the reason for those setbacks is really twofold. It allows the woods to keep farming some of the land, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the minimum that you guys can go and still have a viable project.
We could ask for less, even smaller setbacks. We just didn't want to overextend the request. Obviously, the 200 foot is there for a reason. And so on the array to the north, which I always flip these, so Genesee 5 is to the north, Genesee 6 is to the south. So on Genesee 5, we're asking for 200 to 100 along the eastern property line, which is an agricultural field that the woods are currently farming. They don't own it, but they are leasing it and farming it. Also on Genesee 5 is the 200-foot setback on the shared property line that we're asking to go to 0, so that we can consolidate that area, share a fence line, reduce the amount of space we're wasting with setbacks, and really pull that back into the middle back of the property and away from the front. And then similarly for 6, we're doing that same thing against the railroad tracks on the far east. On the north, that same farm field that I mentioned before, and then to the south is another farmer's field in the very back. There are no residents in that back area until you go over the railroad tracks where these folks live.
Question, of course, the application fee required by the town, I've already talked about, but have you required or obtained the engineering report, the economic impact report, environmental impact, or any other professional services to aid in review of any application? Have all of the engineering, economic impact, and environmental impact, have those reports all been obtained for this? Because that's what's required in the law.
So, as the town board member mentioned earlier, until you have the actual footprint and designated what that footprint is going to be, we can't actually define any of those things you're referencing. Seeker can't be started until you have a set footprint. The economic impact can't be determined until we know exactly how big the site is going to be in terms of megawatts. If certain variances are granted and others are not, that's going to determine the size and footprint. And all of those other elements being sent to outside agencies for review have to go through the variance first before we finalize the actual design for the town board to review. Because if we did that first, there could be material changes, which New York State designates anything between 5–10% or higher as a change, would require the whole process to start over. So for efficiencies, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but after variances, that would be the exact next step would be to start submitting.
I certainly was not a part of the 2018 study as far as solar farms goes, but I mean, the rules are strict, and I'm not trying to be awful to people. I'm reading the rules as
But
they sit.
I think what we're beating to death the application versus what we're doing here tonight. Before they can file an application for all the stuff you're talking about, they have to get variances first.
This hasn't been presented to the town board?
It has been, and they.
Then that would be the application time.
I don't believe that's, no.
It's conceptual.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really conceptual.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Mike? Oh, no, go ahead, somebody different speak, and then it will come back to.
Just an off-hand question, the property owner to the east, that you're talking about setbacks that they don't own the property, how does this affect that person if the future use of their property?
Use of their property for what?
If they want to sell it for housing, building lots, or anything.
I mean, they were.
You're saying they're currently farming that land, but if they don't own it, shouldn't the person that owns the property to the east have some say in what's going on?
That's what this is.
That's what this is, and they're not here.
Okay.
They were notified.
Okay, that's fine, I
Yeah.
just asked.
Yes.
I had that question weeks ago
Yes.
as to, that's being leased, where's the owner? And
Right.
nothing really came of it.
No. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
I mean, we actually over-notified people on this. We put letters out to people, you know, far enough away from this, there should be no one that comes back and says, I wasn't notified.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can you say how far away that was? Because I'm pretty close, I didn't get notified.
I don't know. We looked at them and the secretary went through and you know, picked out the residences. I don't know where he lives.
Well, it's a certain, was it 500 feet?
Yeah, it's supposed to be, but we even went farther than that.
So somewhere between 500 and 1,000 feet from the property?
Yeah, and we went farther than
Which is
that.
quite a, you know, certain amount.
I would check we use county records for
Correct.
addresses, so
Yeah.
I would check with the county.
And we use the county
I've been here
manual.
30-some years, so I consider us neighbors,
Yep,
right? And I
exactly.
And can I say, Bob, I understand why you want what you, I understand it. But there's two sides to the coin, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
How long is the lease?
It would be for the life of the project. So up to 40 years.
up to 40 years? That's enough to blow body's mind, isn't it?
I mean, there's houses in town that are 100 years old. I live in a house that's built in 1927. So the life of the project is obviously the lease, and we want it to be as efficient as possible. So I don't think it's out of the norm to have, you know, a productive structure there for 20 to 30 years, just like maybe a building would be.
What about with technology though? It changes, it improves, and I can't imagine that in 40 years we would still be putting up solar arrays that are like today that you would put up. And would they be replaced, or wouldn't we upgrade, or would you never come back to upgrade?
Well, hopefully, so they have a 25-year warranty. And the expectation is that within that 25 years, they may lose up to 10 or 15% of their efficiency. To make a really simple comparison that I use all the time, at that 25-year mark, if your tires had lost 10% of their tread, it's not economically smart to go out and buy new tires to replace that 10%. You're going to let them, work through the lifespan as long as they're efficient. Ideally, what would happen is if the project is still there in 30 years, we would hopefully have panels that are more efficient. And the best case scenario would be there's higher wattage panels that can function at a better rate on a smaller platform, just like our cell phones have gotten smaller over the years and more powerful. We could potentially produce the same amount of electricity on a smaller footprint and decommission a lot of the area around it and actually shrink it, which would be ideal. If for whatever reason the project is not financially viable at the end of 30, 40 years, we will have a decommissioning plan in place. And thankfully the soils are deep enough here where we don't have to pour any concrete. We're doing a pounded post system. So in order to bring that land back to normal is relatively cheap and relatively easy because we're not pouring concrete, we're not building infrastructure, we're not digging down very deep like you potentially would for a housing tract, a commercial building. So we could return that land back to farmland and give it back to the woods, and they could continue farming for another 40 years after that.
So what would happen if they found something wrong with the dirt and the ground after 10, 15 years of running this stuff? That gets contaminated, then what happens?
Yep, so we would be liable for all of that. So if there is a scenario like that, just like in any other business, if they contaminate the ground, there's a remediation process in place. There is guidance and regulation from New York State.
But you're an LLC, you could just pack up and move away, being an LLC.
Most companies are LLCs. Most companies could do something of that nature.
Okay.
File bankruptcy and claim no liability. But that is basically an issue you're running into with just about every company. So I don't know of any mechanism that a town could impose on any business of any kind that would hold their feet to the fire in that nature. But I live in Rochester. I pride myself on building things that I can drive by and point to and say, I'm proud of that. So my intention, and I know BW's, is to make sure we're not opening ourselves up to liability and lawsuits. So we would do everything we can to make this a viable project for as long as possible, because we don't get a return on our investment unless this is producing energy for the life of the project. It could take up to 10 years for us to see the initial investment back. So again, it's very incumbent on us to make sure it's functioning. Just like any large capital investment in a factory, you want it to pay you back over time by producing some kind of good.
Do you guys do regular testing of the soil over the course of the lease?
That might be in our operation and maintenance plan. It could be a condition. We've had different conditions asked for of different towns. We could look at what that would be to make sure that there is no issue. But barring any type of catastrophe, there shouldn't be any leaking of any materials.
What about a earthquake? What kind of provisions are in place for something like that?
That's a unique one. I don't think I've been asked that before.
Most active earthquake crust is right under GCC in western New York.
I'd have to look into it. I would probably look at what are the current regulations for other buildings and other infrastructure. Obviously, we're not sitting more than 14, 16 feet at any given point. And our infrastructure does have the capability to move and flex. It's not a rigid box. I can definitely look into that. But I would imagine it'd be in line with whatever the other industries are required to have insurance and liability wise.
Okay, is there any other questions? Yes, we have.
If BW goes belly up, they're Ontario, Canada, they go belly up and nobody wants to buy it, who gets stuck with dismantling it?
So that's what the decommissioning plan is in place for. Every project throughout New York State pretty much has a decommissioning plan. It's unique to solar and renewables specifically. And basically it's a plan that outlines what the cost, the future, the current and potential future cost would be to reclaim all of that. I will tell you that it is a tangible asset. And if for whatever reason a company went belly up, we are, just like any other company would, taking out a certain portion of loan to build the project. Just like any business would, any homeowner would. And that's a tangible asset that either the bank could resell or another company. I will tell you that if a solar company goes belly up, it turns into a bidding war for those properties, and they're typically sold very quickly. The CEO of our company came from another company that's been in solar for many years, and he was part of acquiring some projects from another company that went belly up. So it's a tangible asset that has potential to earn money, just like any other building would be. Or if you or I went bankrupt and the bank took our house, it's a tangible asset with value there.
But
So
you're saying that the town will never be stuck with it?
no, and the town shouldn't be. It's not the town's property. Just like if you went bankrupt and had to move out of your house, the town would not be responsible
It
for.
wouldn't be the town's property, but if it's abandoned, it would be.
No, it would not. So actually, the onus falls on the landowners.
I was just gonna say, I mean, if anything happens where they go bankrupt, now it's in the Woods' court. It's on their property.
And if they drop it, then what?
Well, they have to provide a bond.
So-
They provide a bond.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And there's a whole chart of 36 years, and they have estimates of how much it's gonna go up each year. The starting amount is $236,000, and the bond has to increase every year. That's
And we have to have that in place every year as
Yeah.
a surety against it.
And the Woods are aware of that.
Correct. And it would go to us to decommission it. If for whatever reason we didn't do that within a certain amount of time, either the town, and that would be signed with the town board, because they're the fiduciary for the town. If we don't take care of it, that money can then be called into effect by either the town or the Woods. And that would be clearly identified in the agreement that would be signed. And we have to keep that in good standing every single year, or however the segments of the bond would be set up.
We had similar questions to that when we put up the cellular tower. And I think everybody's pretty comfortable with cell towers now.
Ron?
I was just gonna say, it is right in the town law that you have to have a decommissioning plan. But again, all things go wrong if what's left over is not in compliance with the New York State building code. It all comes back to the landowner, and Mike, you covered that exactly. A couple of things. It's been mentioned whether any of these items are considered a poison pill. When we put together this law, we thought that all of these aspects are doable. We see the value plan as doable. We see the setbacks really are meant for the entire town, but are doable probably with adjustments. So there is nothing that we saw as a board in our town law that would prevent the development. It simply would restrict it to what we thought was appropriate property, which would be industrial. Now, one of the things, we keep looking at that 150,000 as if it's some type of penalty. Well, it's not. Going back to the planned unit development. And what do I mean by planned unit development? its best sense, it can be some concentrated housing, but it also can be a trailer park. So even for a trailer park, we require a level of bonding so that we can hire firms. And like we did with the coal project, we hired Clark Patterson for part of the work. We have Steve Mountain under contract, because this all goes beyond what a little town can do. We don't have an engineering department to deal with these guys. So we use them, and we're not going to charge you guys for what it takes to evaluate what they want to do. That's why we put that dollar amount in at the beginning, and we do the same thing to other projects to make sure we have the money to hire these people for that blip in talent requirement. So right off the bat, we're probably talking about the same people over again would be enlisted for this to help us get ready for the seeker. So, and you're gonna go through that money fast. These guys aren't cheap.
Well, I think the whole escrow, 150,000, I think it's just all terminology in steps. We haven't gotten to that step yet.
According to the application process,
We have beat this.
I realize that, but it is
We have
required
beat
by
this.
law.
We have beat this to death.
The solar law was never written to discourage people to have individual stuff on their own roof for the homeowner. It was for the industrial.
Correct.
Yeah, but
Okay.
just, I think Krista said, she might be interested in having something which would work very well.
Correct.
Wouldn't have anything to do with the
No.
solar law.
No. Okay. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing on Genesee 5?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to close Genesee 6.
I'll motion. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now we'll open up our regular scheduled meeting. Does everybody always had a chance to look at the minute chat?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did? Want to make a motion?
Is everybody ready?
Yeah, I think we are.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, we do have, under the old business with BW Solar, I'm going to make a recommendation, and somebody wants to make a motion that we table this in 30 days. I have several questions for our town attorney, which I need to have answered before I can do it.
Well, I think, well, it's a motion to approve or disapprove. I think there's a lot of open questions still. And
Sure.
in the spirit of not getting this into litigation, something now.
Right.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn it for 30
We just
days.
table it for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I second.
I mean, I don't want to keep kicking it down the road, but I have questions that
Good
come up.
questions were brought up.
Okay. Second for that? Kristen, you second it?
I second it, yes.
All in favor? Okay, we do have one thing of new business. The county has sent to us a draft of new recommendations, what gets sent to them, where we used to have to send everything to the county, if it was on a county road or a state road. They have amended this. Does everybody have a copy of this draft?
I didn't see the one.
Well, it's just basically saying that a lot of the stuff, structures in the backyard and stuff don't need to be sent to them any longer. We can send it to them if we want to, but we don't have to. To go any farther with this, we're gonna have to make a motion and prove it that I send this to the town board because they have to approve it and then send it back to the county. I need a motion to send this to the town board under the new guidelines.
I'll make that motion.
Second. All in favor? Okay. A couple of us are getting together on Thursday for the sexual harassment training here.
I don't need that.
You don't need it. all you need to do is send to,
I just sent a reminder to myself
Okay.
to do that tomorrow when I go to work.
you got hers?
I
Okay.
did send you mine?
So you got mine.
I think I did it after last one.
And you do have Jackie, do you have Jackie's? I'll remind her, just to make
Can
sure.
we set a 30-day date?
Yeah, it's our next meeting, the third Monday of the month.
So it'll be the 18th.
What's that?
April 18th.
April 18th. We'll bring this back, the BW solar back to
We're gonna be
the, for
here
vote.
with you. Because Walt's gonna still be in Indiana. BW Solar back on the
Back on the
18th,
agenda.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. Okay, so does anybody else have any questions for the town attorney?
I think the big thing is what this young lady.
Yes, but also the other thing is the 2,500 and 1,000, what his, was he on board with this? Did he have any issues? There's conflicting stories on that, so I want to give it definitive. Any questions you can want to ask?
6 feet.
The reason Dan wants to know that was because it has nothing to do with dimensional or
Yes.
area that might change.
And it came up because the county, Felipe, him and I spoke about this when I told him we were sending this stuff back. He questioned this. I don't know if he reached out to the county attorney, but then him and Mark, our Boyle and our attorney, met and spoke about this, and both of them, there was some confusion on it, and Mark called me just before I got here, and he said that his legal opinion was that we cannot grant this.
If you imagine trying to cost justify an area variance, this is a whole other level, right? The area variances, right, are very
Oh, we're almost in a possibility. Right.
For us to even deal with this is.
Right. Okay, does anybody else have anything? Now I need a motion to close the meeting. Second. All in favor? Aye.